I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Everyone, you are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and I have a huge PSA here. I was at the dentist a couple of weeks ago, and I decided to ask about something I had heard about, but had always kind of assumed was an urban legend. I was making the rounds on the internet a while ago that the dentist can tell if you have given head, when they look into your mouth, they can tell if you've done it recently. And so I decided to ask my hygienist, because, well, I'm me. I was like, I have a really weird question for you, but I wouldn't have asked some other hygienist at the practice, but I could tell that she was pretty chill. I was like, I have a question for you. Is this true? And she was like, you're right. Nobody has ever asked me that before, but she said, yes, it's true. They can tell. It's just kind of the back of the throat looks a little inflamed or a little bruised, depending on how hard you go. And she was like, we've all been there, am I right? And I was like, God, I love this woman. So very, very important information for anybody who is sucking dick on a regular or not so regular basis. Just know that your dentist can tell if you have done it recently. We made it. We are here. We are at episode 69 of the podcast. And I decided I wanted to do something a little bit special. But before we get into that, I want to follow up on last episode about the archetypes. I did a little bit more research on this, and I'm going to link both of these things in the episode notes. There was an article from EV Magazine about 7 different archetypes that are based in Greek mythology. It's kind of Jungian. So this is really cool. It has like the lover, the mystic, the innocent maiden, the nurturing mother, the queen, the huntress, the wise woman, and kind of what these archetypes can tell you about femininity. It's really a great article. I've really enjoyed kind of reading it and doing research. There's also examples from pop culture, like Rose from Titanic is the lover. Contemporary examples for the nurturing mother, you have Mrs. Weasley from Harry Potter, the queen, you have Emily Gilmore from Gilmore Girls. Oh, wow. That resonates. The huntress, Serena Williams, Katniss Everdeen. Yeah, that all makes sense. The wise woman. Gosh, like any Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada. And then the mystic would be the Oracle from The Matrix, Phoebe from Friends, Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Interesting. I don't know that I would view Belle as a mystic, but I guess so. Oh, the mystic woman carries the gravitas of an old soul. Okay, sure. But yeah, it talks about the strengths and the weaknesses of each. Really fascinating article. So I'm going to go ahead and link that. Check it out. See which one you might be. No matter how you identify, get to know your feminine side. Go ahead and check it out. And for anybody, if you go to archetypes.com/quiz, these are a few more archetypes that give you ideas. The different types that they do here are creative, athlete, rebel, caregiver, visionary, royal, performer, spiritual, tastemaker, explorer, advocate, and intellectual. So you can take the quiz and get a sense of what like your top 3 are. Very, very cool. I don't know why I like this sort of thing. I don't know if it's because I was like unpopular in middle school and I like belonging, but it's kind of cool to just like, I mean, I don't want to be put in a box, but I like knowing more about myself, and these quizzes are kind of a cool way to do that. Okay, so we are at episode 69, and I decided that I wanted to do something a little different and a little personal. So I am running a conversation that I had almost a year ago on the Curious Girl Diaries podcast. Around this time a year ago, I had Layla London from the Curious Girl on this show, and then I also did an episode on her show. And get a little personal. Mom, Dad, don't listen to this one. I share a lot. And yeah, I just thought, why not do something a little different? And then it occurred to me, oh, I already have something where somebody interviewed me. Might as well run it. So yeah, if that's not your thing, totally okay. I'll be back in 2 weeks with an awesome episode that, gosh, I'm so excited to run. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the interview role to Layla and get settled in the hot seat. Please enjoy my interview with Layla London from the Curious Girl Diaries podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Curious Girl Diaries podcast. I'm Layla London, aka the Curious Girl. Now, just to let you know, this podcast is not suitable for work. It's also not suitable for anybody under 18. But the rest of you consenting adults, let's get ready to talk about my sex life, sex in general, and everything in between in explicit, raunchy, fun detail. All right, here we go.
I told a story about how a blowjob sent my ex-boyfriend to the hospital.
Oh,
And, yeah.
you should tell part of that story right now.
Yeah.
When you do watch porn, it's generally like they edit out, like you don't see the woman coming very often.
Yeah.
Like how often do you see that? I've gone through my mom's death on this show.
Oh,
I've
gosh.
gone through breakups, and and it's weird. It's like you say, there's things like you feel like, what do I keep in reserve for myself?
Right.
And then there's also this part that you feel like I'm keeping something from my listeners. A trans woman would be hot. That a lot about that turns me on. And and if there's another guy involved, even better.
I personally think that I should peg somebody before I want to put it in your ass before you put it in my ass.
Okay.
That's just kind of how I feel.
There we go. There you go. Rachel's rules. Hey everyone. Well, I'm super excited. Welcome to the Curious Girl Diaries podcast. This is Layla. Today I have a fellow podcaster on, and she has a similar genre as myself. She is the host of Wine, Dine, and 69. Her name is Rachel. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you. Listen to your podcast. Love it.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. I'm super excited to have you. First of all, you know what? Before I even get into the questions, I looked at your questionnaire, and I want to say we're both Buffy fans.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Did you know?
No, I didn't.
When I saw that, I'm like, okay, a kindred spirit.
Yeah. No, it's the best television show, even though it's been off the air for like
the
2
campy humor, that Joss Whedon is the best.
Yeah. I mean, not personally, but like in terms of the stuff that he churns out. Yeah, no, it's really great. I like all of his stuff.
I mean, just
everything's good.
I mean, that's So we're talking about, of course, just in case anybody's like, what are they talking about? We're talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh, because I love vampire stuff. I
Mhm.
you love vampire stuff? Yeah, I mean, I love
totally.
that, like underworld and any kind of a strong heroine. And my gosh, I used to sit that and and watch that with our friends. We would have like Buffy night and just do that. Watch the show when it was actually aired. If that's
my dream.
Dating myself there.
I didn't start watching it until it was off the air.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it on the DVD sets when I was in high school. Yeah. It was wild.
And then sometimes I'll just sit and binge it on Netflix, rewatch it I'll just go through it. I've probably gone through it completely, maybe 2 or 3 times.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And this time of year, I always want to watch the Amends episode in season 3 because of the snow and the magic.
Wait, what happens in Amends?
It's Amends is the one where it's the first time that you meet the first evil in season 3, and the first comes to town and it tries to get Angel to kill himself. And then at the end, it snows and the sun doesn't come out because of the storm. And so Buffy and Angel get to spend Christmas together during the day.
Yes.
It's a beautiful episode.
See, I can still remember the first time I saw it when he turned evil after they had sex.
Yeah.
And I was like, no,
Yep.
I've been waiting so long for them to be together.
Yep.
It broke my heart.
Yep.
Anyway.
No, totally.
Okay. All right. People are like, what are they talking about? All right.
Oh, I could go on and on.
I know. Like, literally, we could have just done this whole thing. I should have just asked you Buffy questions. But anyway, all right. So can you just tell my listeners a little bit about yourself? Just get them familiar with who you are, a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, sure. I am from Michigan originally. That's actually where I'm recording this from now, my parents' house. But I've been living in Philly for the past 7, 8 years, something like that. And I'm in my early 30s and love podcasts, love talking about sex, even though I might not be the most adventurous person in the world. But I found very early on that there weren't a lot of people who were willing to talk about it openly. And I became the person that a lot of people felt comfortable coming to talk about it openly, even though I hadn't had it yet. You know, there was people who, wanted to talk to me about whatever the issue was or how to communicate with their partner. And yeah, I just kind of ended up, when deciding what podcast to do, I kind of decided that this was the best fit. I was part of a girls group on Facebook about like women empowerment and everything. And I told a story about how a blowjob sent my ex-boyfriend to the hospital.
Oh,
and yeah.
You should tell part of that story right now.
Yeah.
Dang.
No, I actually just recorded, I'm very scared of TikTok, but I recorded my first TikTok with this story. So, but yeah, I must have been like just out of college and I was long distance with my boyfriend at the time. And so I drove down to see him on weekends. He was living with his brother at the time. And when we got there, we decided to, get in the shower, and it had been a couple of weeks since we had seen each other. So I was going down on him and all of a sudden he like started falling against the shower wall.
Uh-oh.
And I was like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And he said, oh, like I have a really sudden headache just like came over me. And I was like,
Ooh.
do you want me to finish? Do you want It's like, no. So we went back upstairs and he had to lay down in a dark room. And then, after like a crazy migraine.
I was
and
say
then
it's a migraine. Yeah. Oh gosh. I've had those. They're the worst.
Yeah.
The worst.
And then after about like 20 minutes of this, he was like, we need to go to the hospital.
Whoa.
And so I had to drive. I'd never driven a stick shift before. So I had to drive his stick shift car to the hospital. I stalled it out. He was very irritated and also in pain. And when we got there, it took them a really long time to ask, what were you doing at the time that this came on? And he was like, well, I was having sex. They were like, oh, so there's this thing called coital cephalgia, which is a sex headache, which is something happens to like the vessels in the brain. I'm not a doctor.
No kidding.
But it causes a massive headache. And he actually had to have a spinal tap to make sure that blood didn't go into his spinal column.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's a great story. I mean,
I know.
for him, but
Well,
what a great story. You knew when this was done, you're like, oh, this is one for the books. Like,
yep. I was like, if I do stand up, I got this one. Well, the best part / the worst part was, at the very end, after we were about to be discharged, I said to him, I guess I really blew your mind, huh? And he did not think that was very funny.
He did.
He did not. I think I talked to him a couple years after the fact, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, that was funny. I just couldn't appreciate it in the moment." But
yeah, I can understand.
But yeah.
So
that's kind of the origin story.
All right, but is that what triggered you into podcasting and picking this subject matter?
Yeah. So I was part of this girls group, this women's empowerment group, and I told a story about it. And I told the story, and people were like, "Whoa! Like we want to know what your blowjob tips are if you're sending somebody to the hospital."
Right.
And let's be honest, it was probably more of a him thing than it was a me thing.
Well, you never know.
But
don't sell yourself short. We don't know.
You never know. So I jumped on a Facebook Live and just started talking to these different women around the world about sex stuff, about technique stuff that I had learned. I pulled out my like chest of toys and pulled it out. People wanted to know brands. And then after that, like it just kind of blew up and people started messaging me, wanting advice about things. This person who is one of my closest friends to this day, she lives in Africa, and she started messaging me after that. And yeah, just all these connections kind of happened. And I realized, oh, there's a lot of people in the world don't have a safe place to talk about this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when it came down to, I want to start a podcast. It kind of was like, all right, I've always kind of been this person.
There you go. And you birthed it. And so why is sexuality important to you? And what's your goal for Wine, Dine, and 69?
Yeah. So I think sexuality is so important to me because I dealt with shame a lot early in my life. I started masturbating at a very young age and I did it in public. And, so my parents had to teach me, this is something that you do at home. It's not something that you do. So I kind of dealt with a fair amount of shame. And then as I got older, to rebel against that shame, I kind of just started talking about it incessantly. And so I guess the goal is to create a space where people who feel like they can't talk about it are able to set aside these ideas in the world about what's right, what's proper, what their family or religion expects of them. And they can talk about like what they want and what they feel. Because I think that that's something that I myself am still learning to do as well, to be more in the body instead of the mind.
Yeah.
So I'm learning too. And that's what's so cool about it is I learn with everybody that I talk to as well.
And I'm just curious, like, I always wonder how people choose their podcast name. So how did you choose the name Wine, Dine, and 69?
I actually can't take credit for that. I originally had a co-host for the first about 6 months of the podcast.
I noticed that. I was going to ask about that. Yep.
Yes. She's wonderful. She just is a full-time therapist and didn't have the time to continue. So the show kind of changed from more of a discussion podcast to an interview style podcast. But it was Anna's name. So I do have to give her the credit there. But it is a quote from The Office, I believe, also.
Okay. And what happened to Anna?
We did the first like six months together. And then around this time last year, actually, COVID was like running rampant and she had a crazy schedule with her clients. And it just came down to, you know what, like I have to spend my time effectively. And right now making money, the podcast isn't making money. So,
right. Yeah.
She had to go that way.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't really realize that we're just sort of talking for free. It takes a long time. It's taken me, just to be honest, like it's really taken me 6 years to get to where I'm at with the downloads and then sponsors wanting to talk to me. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's really, it's really kind of, it's been a labor of love. It's just something that you really want to do and you feel like you have to put something out there in the world and whoever listens. Still to this day kind of always shocks me. Like when I see my downloads, like, who are these people? And
like, that's great.
I can't believe that they're listening to me talk about this stuff like that. They find it so interesting. It always tickles me, like just a really humbling way and excited way. Like, no kidding. Like 50,000 people, 57,000 people this month downloaded the Curious Girl Diaries. When I cross like the 500,000 mark, I'm like, what? Like, really? Who? I would sit there and just think, like, seriously, like, who are these people? Like, where are they?
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
It's so exciting.
So I guess just keep at it because the momentum builds and it's just fun.
Yeah.
And like, as long as you enjoy it, it's not, I guess if it's something you want to monetize at some point, that will come. But
exactly. Yeah. I also have an acting background. I went to school for musical theater. And so I'm used to working really hard with very little payoff.
There you go. Yeah.
My ex, not the sex headache ex, but my most recent ex, it's the first time I've called him that actually, recent breakup. But he, I did the podcast for a year and he was like, well, if it's not bringing in money, like, is it really worth your time? And I was like, oh, you don't know how this works. Like it's going to take like a really long time for any money to come in from this.
Right. Yeah.
So,
organic growth takes a long time.
Yep.
But it's worth it. I can just say that it's worth it. And I hope, you stay. I listened to several of your episodes and, I really enjoyed them. And we're going to get to that. I'm going to get into
Cool.
some of those. Okay, here's my one of my first questions. So I saw an episode where you're covering, or you mentioned about women faking orgasms.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to kind of just tell me a little bit more about that episode, what you covered. And I'm always so curious, like, why do you think women fake orgasms? And, at this point, do you feel women have a real handle on their own just sexual identities?
That's a great question. I don't even remember which episode that was, but I do remember talking about it. I think the way that we live in a penis-centric society, a male-centric society. Right? Like we live in a society that's very focused on male pleasure. And I think that women are frequently taught as young girls, and men are taught this too, that, you're kind of sold this sitcom-y idea that sex is something that the woman says that she has a headache and, you just do it for the guy, but you really can't get sexual pleasure from it. So I think that from a very young age, we're kind of sold this idea that we are supposed to be a vessel, literally, for men's pleasure. And so I think that can kind of lead to this faking sometimes. And sometimes it's just like you're not having a good time and you want it to be over, and you know that the best way to get it over with is like to fake it. Like I've been there. So I'd say it's like one of those two things. Either you want to get it over with, or you are in this position where you feel like to please the partner, you have to come. And the fact of the matter is only like, I think 25 or 30% of women come from penetration. Like it's not a common thing.
Right. It's a low number by comparison to, having a clitoral orgasm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think it's so funny when there's so much fixation on, penetration. So I don't know. I think I used to be somebody who faked. And in my last relationship, we had a pretty healthy sexual relationship. And we, just talked very early on about the fact that look, it's not going to happen every time for both of us. Sometimes it might not happen for him. Sometimes it might not happen for me. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a fun, connective experience. And I think that's the mindset that we kind of need to shift to. There doesn't need to be a finish line. There doesn't need to be an end goal of an orgasm. It's about having fun and connecting. And I forget that sometimes too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, definitely. I will say this though, as I've gotten older, I mean, my sexual awareness and my orgasms, just because I'm more connected to what's going on in my own body, have gotten so much better. So that's the fun part, is that it gets better. It gets better and you get better at it and more connected. And then you help your partner be more connected to what you like. And you're less, I guess, caught up in any sort of societal bullshit about how you should be coming or how you shouldn't be coming and any of that. And you're also not affected by, I feel like what I've heard is a lot of guys are affected by porn. They grew up with porn, and I don't know that I've had a problem with guys because they watched porn or they grew up with it. But I think there are, when you do watch porn, it's generally like they edit out, you don't see the woman coming very often.
Yeah.
How often do you see that? And so for young men, young boys that start watching this stuff because it's so readily available, they may just think it's about pound, pound, pound. And then I come and she's just throwing her head back.
Because that's how it's written.
And enjoying it the whole time. They don't realize this is a staged, acted scene.
Yep.
These women are, and the man, that both these people are performers. And to actually give them credit, they're this is a performance. They are working hard at this, and they're acting. And not to say that they probably don't experience some pleasure from it too, but they're really, it's about them getting that scene and just getting it done and whatever that takes. So, but it's interesting because I have, I just definitely, one of the things I have noticed is most porn does not really focus on, my dog just came in here, focus on female pleasure. And it should, and I think and now we have this new wave of what we call ethical porn, and I feel I don't know much about what that actually means, to be honest. You think I'm not going to lie when when people say ethical porn, I'm like, what does that mean exactly to you? What does that mean?
I guess it could have different meanings. It's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a statistic, and I don't know the exact number, but a number of straight identifying women watch lesbian porn, and they might not even be lesbian or have any interest in experimenting with that, or they watch gay male porn. And it's because it's actually focused on like pleasure and clitoral stimulation and not focused on the pounding.
Yep.
So
the heterosexuals, we kind of fuck things up, you know?
Oh yeah.
Really,
massively.
Right. Everyone else is like, listen, let's just talk about how we're really getting it done. Yeah. So I've been through personally, just after doing this podcast and everything, and just over the continuum of my life. And that's what I share, on the Curious Girl Diaries. But I've been through a lot of sexual changes that I've documented, a lot of growth and experimentation. And, my podcast has really helped me to focus on that. And I'm curious, how have you evolved in your sexuality as a woman through your podcast?
Yeah, I think the podcast in a way was kind of like a big kind of FU to some trauma that I experienced earlier in my life. And so like this way of like, no, you're not going to shut down this pleasurable part of me. This part of me that feels pleasure. So it was kind of, part of it had to do with, my boyfriend at the time and just the wonderful amounts of communication that we had surrounding that, but also just talking to experts and sometimes just being like asking for a friend, like, what do you think about this? And getting like advice for myself and then being able to go and try that. It's definitely made me realize, I think for me, the biggest thing right now is I'm realizing that I'm so in my own head and that it takes me a really long time to not be in my own head. And I'm figuring that out.
But we'll get to that. Go
ahead. Okay. Yeah. I want to hear it. Cause like, that's the thing is I'm like, I tend to get like hornier when I'm drinking, but like, I don't just want to have sex when I'm under the influence, but that's just kind of when I'm relaxed enough to want to instigate it. Or when there's been flirtation or, intellectual foreplay on a date night or something.
Yeah.
That's like what can get me going. So just kind of figuring out like what it is that makes me tick has kind of been a process through the podcast because I don't really know what I was like before. I guess I like talked about sex, but I don't know if I wasn't as mindful about it. I talked about it and I had it, but I wasn't as conscious about what was happening up here, when I was engaging in it. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that might really kind of make you present, have you tried any BDSM?
I have not anything intense, very light bondage or like blindfold, but nothing with, ropes or anything like that. Well, I'm not opposed.
Yeah. Well, so I want to point something out really interesting because just when you said, you have a definition, it seems to me in your mind about what it's about because you said, well, I've done the bondage and not anything with ropes, but really BDSM is such a vast, there's a lot under that umbrella.
Because it's mental too.
It's the biggest part of it's mental. And the one thing that I love the most about it is that it demands this really, really great communication and openness and connection with you and your partner. And it also makes you extremely present in the moment with what's going on. And it also helps push out any of that bullshit, all the little chatter, the things that are going on in your mind that can distract you that we all think about during sex. Like none of that exists. It's really quite fascinating. So if you are, up for experimenting, if you can find a really knowledgeable dominant to sort of take you through this, because it's not about the things that you think it's about. It's really not about the I'm going to spank you, and the kink is the kink, and there's just different ways to apply it. It doesn't have to be ropes. It doesn't have to be spankings. It doesn't have to be the pictures, the generic stuff you see. Right. Kind of just know that like you see in the mainstream, like some woman bowing and da da da. It's not. It's really about what the two of you decide. And if you have a really good dominant, he's really going to help you explore this in a way you're going to get the most benefit out of. And it's about bringing that experience to you. And so, I really, if you're up for it, it might be something that you want to explore moving forward, because I find it really, for me, it was just such a life changer
in terms of like the staying present. Yeah, no, I can see that.
Yeah, it really, and it also helped me figure out, kind of understand more about why certain partners previously in my life didn't fit what I needed. I thought that's what I needed. I thought, he checks this box, this box, this box, this box. But come to find out, I was kind of picking the wrong guys. And so it's just been like very, very fascinating. So you're up.
Interesting. Yeah. It's funny too, because such a big part of it is communication and the talking bit. And I was just on a message board trying to find a very particular subset of porn, which is like instructional porn. And I don't even know, I have such a hard time finding it. It's my favorite thing. But having somebody say, but in great detail, explain to me how you want me to do the thing. That's what I want. And it is so hard to find on regular porn sites. So, but it is technically BDSM because it is more about the power dynamic. Yeah. And instructions. So that is, so I guess I have, because that is my favorite thing.
There we go. You're circling. Yeah,
I am. I haven't gone down the drain yet, but I do. Yeah.
So do you consider yourself sexually adventurous?
I think I consider myself sexually adventurous in theory, but again, I have to be at a very particular level of arousal to be able to take action on that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. And I'm such a relationship person too. This is what's interesting is I think that a lot of people assume that because, I have a sex podcast and I talk about it a lot, that I have a lot of experience. The fact of the matter is I've had 7 partners. Yeah. I just have really long-term relationships. Yeah. I find that I want to be adventurous in theory. And then when it comes to biting the bullet, it gets a little bit tougher because I really do need to be in a really kind of heady, almost high state of arousal to be able to do some of those things that I'm afraid of doing.
Yes. Again, the BDSM will really because you'll be aroused as fuck.
Yeah.
Not kidding.
Well, I find it's all about for me, it's all about the teasing. I mean, I would tell people, I'm I want to make out for half an hour. I want to do foreplay for another half hour. And then the penetration can be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but what if you're just in this constant, what if you're kept in that excitation phase for a long time?
I know. That's the dream.
and then somebody gets you to the point where you're dying to have an orgasm.
Right.
You've been held there for so long. And then you finally get that release. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've experimented with edging by myself before, since I was really little, actually, before I knew what it was called. Yeah. But that's always been something that I've been a fan of too. So,
well, when somebody else is doing it to you, that's really turning you on. Oh, it's really, it's it's okay. It's very fun. It's very fun I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I'm because there's just part of me yes, it's hot. It's so hot. And then there's another part that's I just want to come. So
just
bad.
Let me. Yeah.
And then, because you're not the one in control and you don't,
Right.
Glorious.
Okay.
So as a fellow female podcaster, do you feel you really are leaving yourself exposed to your listeners sometimes? And how do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, that's a cool question. And the main difference between you and I is you and me. You and me. I'm an English major, I promise. I'm not anonymous. I have my name out there with everything. And so there are some things that I might be less comfortable sharing, just about my life and about experiences of my past, either to protect people who know me, who might know the people that I'm talking about, or protect myself. I've always been somebody who's very open and vulnerable. Despite my best efforts, I cannot seem to shake that quality. And so I don't really have an issue saying most things. I mean, I guess a good example, would be I waited, I think, 3 weeks to talk about my breakup just because I needed time to process it and be able to talk about it in a way. And it was weird because I felt like I was keeping something from my listeners and I didn't really like that feeling. Yeah. So that was kind of my first experience with feeling like I was keeping something, which was interesting. But I also have to realize that look, at the end of the day, it is my life and I don't owe anybody anything technically, as much as I am a people pleaser and may want to give it to them. But it's definitely been an interesting experience. I feel comfortable with 99.999% of the things that I share. Yeah. So I have the filter is extremely thin, but I protect the things that I feel that I need to be protected.
Yeah. Mine's about 0. I need to get one. And you know what's interesting though? I mean, I have shared some since I've been doing this. I'm going to be starting my 6th season December 19th.
Oh, wow. Coming up.
Yes. And over over a span that long, shit happens and you go through some stuff. And I've had people that I've been seeing, long-term relationships, casual relationships, all that stuff, and the guys will come on the show and some of those guys, we've shared parts of our relationship. And then, I've gone through my mom's death on this show.
Oh,
I've gone through breakups and, and it's weird. It's like you say, there's things like you feel like, what do I keep in reserve for myself?
Right.
And then there's also this part that you feel like I'm keeping something from my listeners, and that feels weird because you don't want to be, you don't want to be fake. Even though I use a pseudonym, and I've remained anonymous, I still want to share everything. I wouldn't say that I'm hiding behind that informationally. I still want to share all this stuff. But it's interesting. And I kind of wondered, as I was listening to you and I was looking at the things you were talking about, a lot of the stuff that stuff you're covering, it's kind of like heavy duty ground, you tackle some big subjects. And I thought, how do you feel about that? And do you feel like, sometimes you're just like giving and, it takes a lot to put that out there, put that energy out there. And sometimes it's kind of also at the same time, a little bit exhausting, always putting it out for
giving and giving and giving. And yep, that's the story of my life. Giving and giving and giving.
Yeah. I think that's a female plight, a little bit.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yes. I'm trying to think of like the best way to even approach that because it's so approachable from all different angles.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. I'm so sad it has to end. Are you craving more content with me? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Go even deeper with me on my private podcast. You get 4 additional episodes a month published every Friday, revealing outtakes from my super private personal audio journal, things said after the show but when I'm still recording, the inside scoop on who's been naughty and who's been naughtier, bombshells I've kept to myself this whole entire time, things I can only talk about with a more intimate group of listeners, and additional surprise bonus content so hot it makes even me blush. So when you finish this episode and you're still craving more, please allow me to satiate you. Just head over to thecuriousgirldiaries.com and click on exclusive or click on the link in the show notes. All right, on with the show.
Angles. It is a really weird feeling to know that you have an audience and people who are invested in your life in a weird way. They know that you're like a real person and it's not like a TV show, but it is a kind of strange feeling and you want to protect your experiences. I guess for me, part of it has to do with what I'm going through at the time that I'm recording, if that makes sense, and the guest and what the guest can bring out of me. So for example, sometime in the new year, I'm going to air an episode with a guest that I got really vulnerable with. It's an episode about trauma. So it's going to be pretty intense. She's like a trauma therapist, a trauma healer. And I got really vulnerable on that one. And we weren't expecting to. We were both like, how did we get here? Like, this is not where we started off, right? But sometimes it just depends. It's where does the conversation go? And what does this person's dynamic with me bring out of myself? So I just find that in some conversations, I'm able to give more and I feel okay with it. And in some conversations, I'm giving a little bit less and I'm still okay with it. But it's definitely a balance I'm trying to master, figuring out like at what point do I stop and at what point how vulnerable is too vulnerable.
Yeah, right. How far do you go? I listened to that one episode that you talked about abuse. It was about an abusive relationship and it was a friend of yours. And
one of my best friends. Yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to part of that. What's so interesting is I heard things in that episode, I was listening to it and I was like, I heard things that triggered some memories I had of relationships. I had seen somebody that was had I have stayed longer, it probably would have escalated and gotten funky. Yeah. And, just very controlling, like didn't like me going out. And even and then if he came out, it was even worse if he came out with me, just watching other guys looking at me.
Oh gosh.
And I was at the time when I saw, and there was one time where he got really upset we were having a disagreement and he punched a hole in the wall. And I was about, again, I'm at this point in my life, I'm like, I think I must have been when I was seeing him probably like 25, 26. And I didn't, honestly, I would say I was ignorance on fire. Ignorance is bliss. And when I was a lot younger, and I still am, but I have this way of, sometimes I find myself in situations, but I always, it's like I get out of it because, I'm quick on my feet or whatever. And I, even at the time, he and I didn't work out, and it didn't escalate into anything because I really am just so much like this, my own little energy ball. And we would have definitely had a problem had we stayed together longer than a year. The tension was already building, and that's what split us apart. But now I look back on that and I was like, oh, I see. And then just even really, when I was listening to your friend, I'm like, some of the things she was saying were triggering memories I was having with this guy. And I'm like, yeah, he was on his way to being abusive. And I really didn't even know it at the time. And I get it, like how women, you go along and you don't really even know the shit has hit the fan until well after it has.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I am in this. And how did I get here? Because it's a slow, it's like being pecked to death by ducks. They just take a little nibble. They don't kill you all at once. It's not this big strike. It's just this little nibble here, little nibble there, little and over time, then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I'm in deep waters. And and I didn't realize how I got here. But that I appreciated that episode. And I thought, I think that's really going to do a lot of good for a lot of people to hear, because it's just not overt.
It's not. It's really not. And
and the guy doesn't walk up and say, hey, I'm an abuser.
No, absolutely. It'd be helpful if they did.
And I don't want to I guess I don't even want to put that label. It's just like, hey, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to just lead you down a road that someday you're going to poke your head up and go, holy shit, where are we? How did I get here with you? It's always based on you're trusting this person. And so that's the thing, is that nobody's being stupid. It's just that you naturally trust the person that you're with and that you're intimate with and that you're in a relationship with. And so if they want to take advantage, they have the easiest access to you that anybody else ever could.
And they know how you tick too.
Right. Yeah. And so they shouldn't be patting themselves on the back for having got you there, slowly pushed it there over time. It's because it's easy to take advantage of people that give you their trust up front.
It really is.
Yeah. And so, but I was listening to that. I was like, oh my gosh, I never really thought of this guy in that way. I did a little bit because my friends, they'd see me out when they met him and they're like, why are you wearing that? Why are you all covered up? I literally would be in a sweater set. No joke. Because he was like, I don't want you wearing that. And I'm like, why? And I never dressed inappropriately, but I was just like, well, okay. I thought, well, I don't want to take whatever. That's like, oh, you just make the small concession because you're like, I don't want to make him unhappy.
Right,
and and you don't really think of it and then some of my friends were like, Layla, you are just not acting like you're this is weird. And they could see that I was acting differently and I didn't even really realize it at the time. And it was really just a short stint, but I think we went out for about a year. But yeah, you will cross paths with some.
It's scary. Yeah. My first boyfriend was kind of that person for me, very controlling. And I was 14, that's really young. And, I do have another guest coming up again in the new year who is another survivor of an abusive relationship. And so her story is going to be aired as well. And she actually wrote a book about her experience. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know where I put myself in that genre, but I know when I was listening to your friend, I heard some things and I was like, oh yeah. Oh yeah. It wasn't as, it never escalated. He didn't physically.
Sure.
But it's not just that stuff, not the physical stuff. Yeah. So I hope that more women hear that episode because it was a really, really great one. Yeah. And which I hope you would pass it along to your friend.
I definitely will.
I think that she's very brave to do that. And I think you both birthed a really good episode together. And I think that it's going to help. It's helping. It's putting good stuff out there.
I was really proud of her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could tell. And it was really cool. So give me 2 of your favorite interviews that you've done on your podcast. And I just want to know, what did you love about them the most?
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind is I'm going to do a little promo for Please Me. Heather is the CEO of Please Me. Please Me is a online kind of like social media site, which is for sex. And there are no rules. I mean, the only rules are like nothing illegal, but it's so hard to go on the internet, and I have stuff blocked from YouTube and from all of my things all the time just because it links to something that has an image. It's so difficult. And so Please Me is this platform that is meant to kind of just be a social media space for you to be able to share those things. What I really like about it is you can take a quiz. There's 7 different sexual types. Sexual worlds, I guess is what they call. And you get put into the world and you can get lingerie or sex toys or like ideas or porn based on what your world is. So it kind of like gives you this ability, kind of like a zodiac sign, gives you this ability to like be categorized and learn from there. So when I just spoke with her, I was like, this is the future. This is everything that I want. So that was a really exciting interview for me. And when people ask me about like my favorites, that one definitely pops up at the top of my brain. I'm trying to think of like, there was one recently and I'm trying to remember which one it was that I aired that I was like, oh, do you ever find that you interview people at the exact right time that you talk to them in your life?
Yeah. Like, yes, I know. That's why I hope, so I love that you brought up that point, because I hope that my listeners and anybody that hears this gets that takeaway, is that obviously after 6 years of doing this show, a lot of it I talk about me, but there's only so much I can say about me all the time. But my goal, has always been, it's just really a simple slogan. It's just making your sex life a priority. And so
absolutely
a lot falls under that umbrella. And that is, it's anything and everything. And even my intro, it's like, let's get ready to talk about my sex life, sex in general, and everything in between, and explicit, raunchy, fun detail. And that sums it up. And so I want to bring great resources, thought-provoking other podcasts. And I do enough of me, and it's in there. It's of course, it's in there. It's a lot devoted just to me, but also having people on that, can help my listeners. You'll say something or something in an episode that you have is going to click with somebody differently, and they're going to hear it,
absolutely,
whatever the message they need to hear. And the same thing for me and you, probably as the conduit, like we get the same benefit too. It's the first time.
I've had so many realizations on the air.
Yeah.
I've had so many realizations like on the air, and I'm just like, I just figured that this thing about myself. Poof. Oh, imagine that.
Like I said,
just through the conversation.
Just listening to one of your interviews, I was like, holy shit. Wow. Yeah. Ding, ding, ding.
Lots of realizations.
I'm like, holy cow. I always thought of him a certain way. And thank God, I'll say this. Thank God for my parents, because they probably should have beaten me, but they never did. I had so much confidence. Like I really just felt like I could do anything, be anything, say anything. And the world was my oyster, and not in a self-serving kind of a way, just that like I had all this confidence. And so when I was up against somebody like this, that was taking me down a road I didn't want to be going down, I was young enough and dumb enough to not actually know where that was going. But I also knew this isn't right for me. And I didn't have a problem saying, nope, not right for me, moving along. And then you look back and you go, I have dodged so many bullets.
Yeah.
Like really, like, thank goodness. But
it's crazy how mixture of you and just like life happening in certain ways that gets you to where you need to be. I'm in the middle of like a weird spot in my life right now. And I just keep being like, all right, you know what? Like it's their lessons, and this is it's all unfolding for some greater purpose. I have to believe that.
Just push forward. Yep. And you don't always have to have the answer. So my thing has been always one of my mottos is like, I don't always have the answers, but I know I'll figure it out. And again, that really strong sense of self and just being able to move it constantly, keep moving forward helps me, because you don't know why this is happening, what the point is, but just keep moving forward and you will figure it out and you'll be all right.
Yep.
Just.
Yeah, that's the definition of faith. It's faith in oneself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So I don't think I might have cut you off there. Did we get to two of your favorite episodes?
I guess another one that I just aired recently actually was Dr. Stacy. We discussed a lot of different things about sex, mostly kind of like you and I started off talking about like how to be confident and present during sex. And so that was a episode where the entire time I was just going to take a note here, going to take a note there. Mm-hmm. That was a really cool conversation. Another sex coach, Ainsley Brooke, was another really cool person that I got to talk to. And that was another aha moment for me where I kind of, I've been trying to figure out what I want to do career-wise. And after talking to her, everything just kind of, I figured it out right after that conversation based on talking with her. So personally, that one was just a really big turning point episode for me.
Yeah. I think, you cross paths with the right people and they'll push you forward or or push you a different direction. And it's the same thing I consider, I really feel like it's the same thing with partners, sexual partners and, romantic partners. And we're all just, you can always find something like this valuable lesson in the experience and take something out of it. And it ends up serving you
absolutely
multiple times. That experience will compound on itself as you move forward. I learned that, or I don't need to be repeating that, because I learned that one once,
the alarm bells go off and you're like, I've been here before.
Yeah.
I need to do it differently this time.
Yeah. It's all just, it's really, to me, it's all good stuff, even though sometimes it can be painful. It can be sad. It can be, there's a lot of stuff we go through. We just don't it's not all butterflies and rainbows. Yeah. But
I'm reading Man's Search for Meaning right now by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I'm having a lot of big moments where I'm just kind of being aha, aha, aha. And it's that same thing of it's all about the experiences. It's not all going to be butterflies and rainbows. It's going to be some shit that you have to dig through.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's good fertilizer.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Lotus flowers are grown in mud.
That's right. Do you have a sex bucket list?
I do.
And what's on it?
I can't believe I'm in my parents' house right now. I really would like to try pegging.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
I would really like to try
a man
pegging.
or a woman?
A man.
Okay. Yeah.
I just love the power dynamic.
Yeah.
That is kind of happening there.
Yeah.
I would also love to have and again, I'm still not sure if this is just an idea that I like in theory and if I would want to bring it into practice or not, but I would love to do a threesome with a guy and a trans woman. But of course, I don't want to fetishize somebody.
Yeah.
For who they are either. So that's kind of a tough one that I know I would be interested in it, but the last thing that I want to do is make somebody feel uncomfortable. So,
and why do you think
if the opportunity presented itself naturally,
do you think it? So why do you think it? Are you saying the trans woman would feel uncomfortable?
I'm wondering. I mean, I'm wondering just because a lot of the trans women that I know or have come across, they're a woman, and so they want to be penetrated. They don't want to penetrate, and so the idea of having sex with a trans woman, I just worry that by asking somebody to penetrate me when that's not. But maybe, I'm sure there are trans women out there who do want to penetrate. So just got to maybe find one of those.
Yeah, I think, and I wouldn't say I have a lot of experience in this either, but I think that the trans community, again, it's hard to paint it with narrow strokes. It's really,
no one's a monolith.
Yeah. There's so much, some of the women are, it's a trans woman, but she's now she still likes women. And then there's trans women that they're bisexual, and there's trans women that only like men, and so it's just every single person with their preference. And so I don't think that, you'd be fetishizing or you'd have to worry about that, because I think that what you will find is the right person that matches up with what you're looking for. And same thing, you're not fetishizing men because you want to peg one.
Sure.
Some of them don't want to be pegged. They will tell you nope, that's not for me. And they're not going to be offended. You're like, how dare you think I would want to be pegged? Some of them do, and some of them don't.
True.
So
yeah.
It's just, there's so much out there, and there's a lot of fluidity. So I guess the only thing I would add to that is just go for it. Be open-minded and explore, because I have the same thing. Like, I would really like to, I think a trans woman would be hot. That a lot about that turns me on. And if there's another guy involved, even better, like,
yeah, totally.
Thank you. You just gave me a great idea. Like my first trans woman thing was like, oh, me and a trans woman. I'm like, hey, now we could add more to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And why not? I mean, there's just so many different ways to skin a cat. You may as well just try it all. And what I found too, just from my own being open to experimenting, is one door opens and it may not be the right thing, but it pushes you in a different direction, and then 10 more open. And that's really the fun part. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you have a trans woman. What else is on your bucket list?
I'm curious about anal. I don't know if I actually want to do it, but I feel like I should, if that makes sense.
You've never done anal?
I haven't. No. I mean, I've done like toys or fingers, but yeah, I've never done, because I personally think that I should peg somebody before I want to put it in your ass before you put it in my ass. Okay. It's just kind of how I feel.
There we go. There you go. Rachel's rules.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, that's the thing. Because it sounds so stupid, but like, I would just like to think that if a guy's had anal before and he's had it with, someone who has had it a lot, he might not know the best way to go slow for somebody's first time.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if you experience it yourself, then like maybe you'll learn how to be gentle.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Well, see, now I never thought of it that way. I love that. That's a really interesting perspective. Yeah.
I don't know. I just kind of am like, look, like if I'm going to do it for the first time, then like, I know that I can be gentle, but I have less faith that somebody who has done it before many times with other people is going to know how to take someone's, anal virginity. And so I just kind of I feel like I could teach them.
Yeah.
And then hopefully they would be, is that weird? I feel like that's like a weird mentality, but
you know what? What two consenting adults, there's nothing weird between what two consenting adults,
True.
3 consenting adults, or what 4 consenting adults, what consenting adults agree upon. It's not weird.
I just think my mentality about it is just kind of interesting.
Yeah. I
go first.
Perspective. I see where your mind's going with that. I'm like, that's a good point. Like, I never thought of it that way. I have pegged a guy, not pegged. Well, I'm sorry. I have gone past the pegging. I have pegged a guy with a dildo. I wasn't strapped into me, but I've also fisted a guy.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah. That was his thing. He wanted to do it.
All right.
Yeah. And I mean, he asked me. Unbelievable.
Interesting.
His reaction to it, like, talk about the power. I mean, you have your whole fist in there, but not only that, just to watch, and I wasn't even touching his penis. I mean, just to see his reaction to that and the orgasm that he had, I was like, whoa. I mean, so strong. And
wow.
Wasn't even no contact with his penis.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Just my fist.
And hey, I'm glad people like know what they want and can ask for it. That's what I like to see.
I know. And you know what? And I was like, well, never thought about doing that. But you know what? We were together. I liked this guy. We had a great relationship and we were into exploring things. I'm like, yeah. And so again, it's just about the openness and what people agree on and what they want to try. And
totally. Yeah.
It definitely always continues to move you in a fun direction.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I don't know that I would be open to that, but you never know, though. That's the thing, is you never know.
Let me just
presented with it.
I'll leave you before I ask you, before we wrap this up, and I ask you where everybody can find you. I want to say one thing. Everybody that's listened to the show over the years, you can go back and listen to me in the very beginning, and over the years, going, I will never do that. Like, and then sure enough, boom! And I'm like, oh my God, that's my favorite thing.
Yep.
I think the one thing that I would impart on anybody who's exploring sexually is just never say never. It's okay to say.
Yeah.
What I will say now, I've taken that out of my vocabulary. I've said, right now, I don't think that's for me. And so there's other things I'd rather focus on. And I'll like leave it at that, because do I think that scat play or piss play or any of that kind of thing, is that ever going to be for me? I could probably fairly say, I could use the N word and say never, never, never. And I feel confident in that. But I've had people ask me that and I'm like, right now, it's just not my thing. So
right now, yeah, that doesn't mean never.
Right now, I don't really, that's not on my radar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because every time, Rachel, no joke, every time I said never, I've had to eat my words. And I could probably go back and pull up all the transcripts from all my shows. If I was dedicated, I'd go back and just be like, said it here. Boom, boom, boom. Like I'd never do that. And then, yes, I did. Yeah. I mean, I said it a lot.
You should put like a list up of all the various times.
All the never, ever, would I evers.
Yeah. And then the time that you did.
It's embarrassing. I mean, it's not embarrassing. I don't mind. Like, I love to see my own like personal growth. Like I find that fascinating. And that's what I love about doing this podcast. And I hope that you're getting the same out of yours, just like, that's what I love so much about it. It's like you're documenting your personal growth and it's really fun. And I just go, well, there we go. I did it again. Like I said I wouldn't. And then I ended up, so there you go. So tell everybody where they can find you.
Yes. So on Spotify, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever podcatcher you use. On Instagram, very weird, like Wine Dine 69 pod. TikTok, you can see me tell the story about the blowjob with all of my facial expressions. Facebook, YouTube. If you have a question that you want answered or, my take on something, you can email at winedine@allportsopen.com. And then the best way to find me really is Linktree, and it's Linktree/WineDinePod. And on there's also my Please Me referral link so that you can take the Please Me quiz. And from there, you can figure out which sexual world you belong to. And I think you get VIP access for 3 months. So,
oh, cool. Well, I will definitely put all your links in the show notes in case anybody didn't get that, so they don't have to worry. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. You guys know how much I love you. I hope we're getting close to Christmas. I hope everybody's getting ready, getting all their shopping done. I know, like when I came home today, there was a bazillion boxes piled up in front of my front door from Amazon. I'm like, ooh, thank you. But things are arriving. And I just hope everybody's staying happy, healthy, and safe. And you guys know how much I love your feedback. And if you want to give me some, or if you want to leave some for Rachel, you can always go to the website, thecuriousgirldiaries.com, click on the pink tab on the right-hand side, leave me a voicemail. You can go for up to 5 minutes. Just let it rip and I will get back to you personally. And if it's for Rachel, I will forward it to her and she can get back to you. All right. Thanks, guys. Love you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you like what you hear, refer me to a friend. And make sure you're following me on social media. Also, go to the website, thecuriousgirldiaries.com, and join my subscribers only list for access to exclusive content. And as usual, questions or comments, you can always email me at curiousgirl@thecuriousgirldiaries.com.